Hello. So we all know that there's Epstein files. We all know that the files exist, or some variation of whatever the files may be. Apparently, there's no list. The US government, Trump, etc., are walking that back now. There was a list. There's no list anymore. There's nothing to see here. There is something to see. We're going to talk to Maxwell. We're not talking to Maxwell. It's just a mess. But apparently this segment will explain why it's not so straightforward about releasing the Epstein files. Let's have a look.
Trump administration need to do to handle this Epstein saga?
Release the damn files. Look, it makes no sense to me. One of two things is true, I believe. Either it's a nothing burger in terms of the evidence we have. Let's separate it from this guy being disgusting and what he did and the systematic trafficking of young people, minor age people for sex purposes. But the promise to release the files during the campaign was either overplayed and we got a nothing burger if the files get released, or it's something really disturbing, and that's actually even a more compelling reason to release it. And this nonsense of, well, we've got to protect the innocent witnesses, those sorts of things, that's called redaction. We do that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you could redact all the names of the victims. You could even redact the client list. We call it the client list. I think the big thing is with that list is there's going to be people who were associated with Epstein that might not necessarily be involved in the trafficking scandal. Not everybody is a Prince Andrew.
That's sort of a fake or for a bad reason for trying to stop something that you don't want to happen. So I think the files should be released. Let the light of day, let the sun shine through. And that's the best way to get past it. Otherwise, if anybody thinks that this is going to go away because the House left a day early or something, it's got to be like those zombies in The Walking Dead. Every time you think you've killed it, another one's just going to come running out of the closet after you. This is going to be an issue all the way through next year's election.
Yeah, it's going to keep coming back and back and back. And I think I mentioned it on a previous video. I can imagine that this ends up being in the same discussion as the 9/11 conspiracies or Martin Luther King or JFK. In 20 years' time, we're still talking about the Epstein list.
That was Republican Senator Tom Tillis yesterday calling for the release of the Epstein files. It comes amid new reporting from the Wall Street Journal that President Trump's name is indeed included in the documents. And Joe, it's one thing for Senator Tillis to say it. He is not running for re-election again. He doesn't face some of the political consequences. But we have heard persistently from Republican lawmakers, particularly in the House, as well, that they want this information out there. And we did, even as Speaker Johnson sends them home, an effort for a subpoena. They want to learn more of what's in there.
Yeah, a lot of questions. Also, though, a question about how they're released. Because he says just release the damn files. If only it were that easy. You don't just release the damn files, DOJ files, no matter what they are. And by the way, yes, you can redact the alleged victims' names. You can redact other people's names where they don't have enough proof to charge them, which would be a lot of the names. And so then what do you have? You have documents where everything's redacted, and all that does is make the MAGA base even angrier. So it's not.
Also, it makes any prosecutions harder, I should imagine, because with any case, if you're building a case against people or a case that could potentially be brought forward later, if you've released all that into the public domain, it becomes harder to use that in any investigation. So, yeah, I can imagine it's not straightforward releasing these files.
Really that simple. We'll talk to some really smart people right now to figure out how this may end up getting done. Let's bring into the conversation NBC News and MSNBC political analyst, former U.S. Senator and fan of another baseball team from the Central Time Zone, Claire McCaskill. Also MSNBC political analyst Brendan Buck. He was communications strategist and a former aide to House Speakers Paul Ryan and John Boehner. Mike Barnicle is still with us. So, Claire,
Mike Barnicle looks like he's ready to go off. He looks a bit pissed off, doesn't he?
really quickly, so if you were the Attorney General and you were in this situation, you had a base saying, let's say on the left, a base demanding the release of all these files that have a bunch of hearsay, have a bunch of allegations that your office has never moved on because you didn't have enough evidence to bring the charges. You could just release, quote, the damn files, but you're going to have to redact like 80% of the names in there. What do you do?
Well, I think you definitely have to redact the victims' names and obviously the materials in there that are difficult. But, you know, Joe, they just released all of Martin Luther King's files. There was plenty of hearsay in there. So, you know, there is this, you know.
Yeah, I think it's time, though, with Martin Luther King. Everybody involved in that is probably now passed on. So I suppose it's different than something being recent, because you've got a lot of people who is on the client list who had interactions and relationships with Epstein that are still knocking around.
Here's the thing about Donald Trump. He cares about false accusations about other people.
Yeah,
and
but Claire, are you saying if you're Attorney General, you would use Donald Trump's standard?
No, I'm talking about, if I was Attorney General, I would try to release what I could legally that was reasonable and lawful. Bottom line, that's what I would do if I were Attorney General. But what you're seeing happen here is you're seeing, as usual, blatant, gross hypocrisy, because Donald Trump specializes in false accusations against people. He specializes in making accusations with no proof.
He did come out and say Bill Clinton is going to have a bit of a horrible time because of the Epstein situation. Where's the evidence? If that's the case and he's in the files, release the files. So she's got a point.
That's his main deal. And he doesn't care about the rules.
He doesn't actually, does he?
In the court system. I mean, he just nominated a guy from one of the highest courts in the land that said, F you to the courts. So we really need to, you know, that's what's really, I think, hard for the MAGA base, because they've seen him do things that they know bust the norms of the rule of law. And they can't figure out why he won't do it in this instance. And it's pretty simple. He goes back to following the rules when it's going to protect him. That's the bottom line.
She's probably got a point.
And in terms of whether we will see some of this material, a federal judge in Florida denied a request from the Trump administration to release some grand jury transcripts from the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. The Justice Department had cited special circumstances and historical interest by the public when requesting to unseal the transcripts that date from 2005 to 2007. But in a ruling yesterday, the judge wrote that, quote, the court's hands are tied, adding the government's rationales are no exceptions to grand jury secrecy. The Justice Department now has another chance. 2 judges in New York are currently considering similar requests. So, Joe, Florida is a no-go, at least for now, but the Trump administration now going to New York to see if perhaps they will sign off on releasing some of this material. But it's a complicated matter.
Well, yeah, very complicated matter. And Mike Barnacle, we had Dave Ehrenberg on the show several days ago saying, okay, of course they're going to request a grand jury testimony, and the judge is going to say no. And so, therefore, they can blame another judge for not releasing information they don't want released in the first place. And
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. If they knew that they were going to get that request denied, then it looks good for the public if you say, we want this information, but the judges are saying no. But you knew that the judge was always going to say no in this case.
Ehrenberg was right. Judge denied this. The next judge will probably do the same.
You know, Joe, I'm wondering how many people, how many members of the MAGA coalition that surround Donald Trump and support Donald Trump have ever seen an FBI transcript, an FBI file. I'm sure you have at some point in the past in your congressional career or whatever. I mean, they are loaded with all sorts of scatological observations that FBI agents make during any investigation. And they are loaded with names of people, passers-by, so to speak, from situations involving crimes committed or crimes perhaps not committed. And those names will have to be redacted because they implicate people who are just innocent, completely innocent of a charge that's being discussed. And Jonathan, it's such a serious matter that given the politics of it, the MAGA base, I would suspect, would strongly oppose any redactions, which is antithetical to the way this thing ought to be going.
Right, and that.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, imagine if it was just an innocent meeting with a client who's got nothing to do with the trafficking scandal. That name is in the files because the FBI were monitoring the situation and said, this meeting happened on this date with this person. You release that, the public are then going to go straight in on that person. Because you know what the public's like? The general public are a mob. And the mob will just take it and run with it and go, that person must be guilty then.
Case is sort of a no-win situation here. They're never going to be satisfied with what comes out because, of course, there needs to be some common sense redactions at minimum to protect the innocent.
Yeah, will we ever see them? It's strange how both parties, basically Republicans, Democrats, you've got people on both sides who say let's release the files, but then you've got people on both sides who say don't release the files, or we shouldn't because there's nothing to it. If there's nothing to it, then redact what you need to redact and release it, or have an independent investigation because you can't trust the government at the minute to give you the truth. So, I don't know. I think this Epstein thing is going to rumble on and on and on, to be honest. Interesting stuff, but we'll see where the chips lie. Let me know what you think. See you on the next one.